The doctors had already stepped back. The monitors were silent. The room had gone still in the way rooms only go still when everyone present has accepted that there is nothing left to do. A man in a suit stood against the wall with his hands over his mouth. A senior physician pointed toward the door. A nurse looked at the floor. The baby had stopped breathing for minutes, and every attempt to revive him had failed. Then a girl in a torn gray shirt pushed through the door. Nobody noticed her at first. She was maybe 11 years old, small for her age, with muddy shoes and the kind of quietness that comes from spending too much time being invisible. She had followed the ambulance on foot from 3 blocks away because she had seen the father running and something told her to run too. She reached the sink before anyone could stop her. What happened in the next 60 seconds would be debated, documented, and replayed in that hospital for years. Before we begin, if you believe that courage has no address and kindness wears no uniform, please like this video, subscribe to Enlightened Story, and share this with someone who needs to believe in people again today. The girl's name was Maya. She was 11 years old and had been living without a permanent home for 8 months. Not on the streets entirely, but close enough. She moved between a church shelter that closed at 7 o'clock in the morning and a dry space beneath an overpass that she had made as close to a room as a person can make a concrete ceiling and a cardboard floor. She had a backpack with 3 items in it: a change of socks, a photograph of her mother, and a small book about the human body that she had found in a donation bin outside a clinic 2 years ago and had read so many times the spine had split. That book is important. Remember it. Maya had been curious about medicine since she was 6 years old. When her younger sister stopped breathing for almost a minute during a severe allergic reaction, and a paramedic had arrived and brought her back with calm hands and precise movements that looked to Maya like the most important thing she had ever witnessed a human being do. She decided that day that she wanted to understand the body, how it worked, what could go wrong, what could fix it. Without school access, without a library card that stayed valid when you had no fixed address, she read whatever she could find: donated medical pamphlets, outdated textbooks left outside campus buildings, that battered book about the human body, which explained in a chapter on infant emergencies what to do when a baby inhaled water or fluid, and how the airway needed to be cleared before the lungs could restart. She had read that chapter many times. She had never imagined she would need it. The morning it happened began like most of Maya's mornings. She was sitting near the entrance of a park 2 blocks from the hospital, eating half a granola bar she had saved from the shelter the night before, watching the city arrive at itself. She noticed the man first, expensive suit, running in a way that men in expensive suits almost never run, with total abandon, with no awareness of who was watching, because something had overridden everything except the emergency. The man was carrying a small bundle against his chest. Maya stood up. She did not know why exactly. She just did. She followed. The hospital entrance was 3 blocks away. By the time Maya arrived, the man had already been taken through the emergency doors. Maya slipped in behind a family entering through the same entrance and followed the sound of raised voices down a corridor and through a set of doors that were still swinging. She came into the room just as the senior physician was raising his hand and saying the words no parent is ever prepared to hear. The baby, 8 months old, had been found unresponsive at home. The preliminary assessment suggested he had inhaled fluid while in a bouncy seat that had tilted during a brief moment. His father was in the next room. By the time the father found him, too much time had passed. The team had worked for 4 minutes on arrival with no response. The man in the suit, the father, was pressed against the wall. His name was Desmond Whitmore. He was the founder of one of the largest private investment firms in the state. He had never once in his adult life encountered a problem that money could not eventually solve. He was completely helpless. And then a girl in a torn gray shirt reached the sink. Maya had seen something the moment she entered the room. A faint movement, the smallest possible twitch in the baby's fingers, so small that everyone else had moved past it. She did not stop to explain. She did not ask permission. She crossed the room, gently but without hesitation, lifted the infant and positioned him face up under a slow stream of cool water, the way the book had described, supporting the head and neck precisely, angling the body to let gravity help the airway clear. That is when the physician pointed at her and shouted. That is when the man in the suit said, "What are you doing?" That is when the nurse moved toward her. Maya did not let go. She said quietly, without turning around, "Please just give me 1 minute." Something in her voice stopped the room. Not authority, not volume, something else. The particular steadiness of a person who is not performing confidence but actually has it, earned through 2 years of reading the same chapter over and over in a concrete space beneath an overpass, because the body fascinated her and knowledge was the one thing no circumstance had been able to take away. 40 seconds passed. Then the baby coughed, then cried. Then the room collapsed into motion all at once. Doctors rushing forward, monitors being reattached. The nurse who had been moving toward Maya, stopping completely still with her hand over her heart. Desmond Whitmore slid down the wall until he was sitting on the hospital floor with his face in his hands, making a sound that was not quite crying and not quite anything else. Maya set the baby gently on the examination table, stepped back, and picked up her backpack from where she had dropped it by the door. She was almost in the hallway before Desmond looked up and said, "Wait, before we continue, we want to stop here, because what Maya did in that room is the most visible part of this story. But Enlightened Story wants you to know what made it possible." hospital. 2 years before that morning, a clinic volunteer named Eleanor had left a box of donated books outside the building at the end of a long shift. She did not sort through them carefully. She did not think about who might pick them up. She simply left them rather than throwing them away, because throwing away books felt wrong to her. Maya found that box at 6:30 in the morning. She took one book. A retired paramedic named Walter ran informal first aid sessions at the church shelter on the second Sunday of each month. He let anyone attend. He did not check whether attendees had a home address. Maya came to 3 of those sessions. Walter showed the group how the human airway works and what position matters most when an infant cannot breathe. Walter never knew Maya's name. Maya never forgot what Walter taught. A shelter supervisor named Margaret let Maya stay an extra 40 minutes past closing on cold mornings when she could tell the girl had nowhere warm to go. She never noted it in the register. She just did not lock the door until Maya had finished whatever she was reading. None of these people were in that hospital room. All of them were. This is what Enlightened Story believes, that every act of human decency travels further than the person who gave it will ever know. Eleanor's box of books, Walter's second Sunday sessions, Margaret's unlocked door, they all arrived in that room with Maya. Desmond Whitmore found Maya in the corridor. He had left his infant son in the care of the medical team, followed the girl into the hallway, and stood before her with an expression that had nothing practiced in it, nothing managed. Just a man who had been to the edge of the worst moment of his life and come back because a child in a torn shirt had refused to accept what everyone else had already accepted. He asked Maya where she lived. Maya told him the truth. Desmond did not react with pity or with the particular discomfort that people sometimes display when poverty arrives close enough to feel real. He asked Maya 2 more questions. What do you want to do with your life and what do you need to do it? Maya answered both. The arrangement that followed was not charity. Desmond was clear about that from the beginning, and Maya was clear that she would not have accepted it as such. It was investment. Desmond had spent 20 years identifying people who had something rare and making it possible for that thing to grow. He had simply never before found that person in a hospital corridor at 11 years old with a split-spined book in a backpack. Maya was enrolled in school within the month. She lived with a foster family that Desmond's foundation had supported for years, the Calderon Reyes family, a couple with 3 other children and a loud kitchen, the kind of home where the front door was always unlocked because someone was always arriving. She was given access to a tutor twice a week, a library card, a winter coat. She asked if she could keep the book about the human body. Nobody had ever suggested she couldn't. 4 years later, Maya was the top science student in her school. She attended a regional medical symposium at 14 as the only middle school participant. She sat in the front row and asked 2 questions that the presenting physician later described to a colleague as the most precise questions anyone had asked all day. Desmond's son, now 5 years old, called Maya by a nickname that had developed over years of visits and could not quite be translated into adult language. What it meant, roughly, was the person who stayed, because that is what Maya had done. When everyone else stepped back, she stayed. The night before Maya's first day of high school, she sat at the Calderon Reyes kitchen table and wrote a letter. Not to Desmond, not to the doctors. She wrote it to Eleanor, whose full name she had eventually learned by tracing the clinic donation box back to its source. She wrote it to Walter, the paramedic, now retired to a smaller town 2 hours away. She wrote it to Margaret, the shelter supervisor. She told them what their small decisions had made possible. Eleanor wrote back within the week. She said she had not thought about that box of books in 2 years and had cried for 20 minutes after reading the letter, then called her sister to read it again. Walter wrote back on paper so old it had yellowed at the edges, and said that he had taught those second Sunday sessions for 11 years, and this was the first time he had ever heard what happened after. Margaret did not write back, but the shelter director told Maya months later that Margaret had framed the letter and hung it on the wall beside the door she used to leave unlocked on cold mornings. The door she still left unlocked. Never count out a person because of where they are sleeping tonight. Never assume that because someone has nothing, they know nothing. Never mistake quietness for emptiness, or worn shoes for a small life. And never forget that the knowledge which saves a life might live in a book left in a box on a pavement by someone who simply could not bring herself to throw it away. If the story moved you, please like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs to believe in people today. Subscribe to Enlightened Story for more stories of courage, resilience, and the quiet human decisions that change everything. Because kindness does not always arrive in a white coat. Sometimes it arrives in a torn gray shirt carrying a book with a broken spine, and it stays when everyone else has stepped back. Welcome to Enlightened Story. We are so glad you are here.